What is going on? Welcome back to the EOS Phoenix channel. You can see it's a beautiful view this afternoon on a Sunday. Hope everybody's having a great afternoon. I'm going to give you guys a view here. This is my favorite spot in Camelback. I usually rotate spots and just like coming up here by myself and having a moment of reflection. And I figured I'd talk to you guys. What better opportunity, what better view to have a chat. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you guys are enjoying the view. And if you like this content, hit that like button. Consider subscribing to my channel. I wanted to go over today kind of a weekly recap on where things stand in the crypto markets and in particular EOS. We've seen, I think the theme this week, and I was on the Telegram channels for most of the week, has been I think information asymmetry between various token holders, some hearing rumors from others, and the fact that the rumors aren't even remotely true had been amusing. And we saw the market sell off pretty substantially. I think EOS even went down to $1.50 or so, a little bit above that. And part of that, we heard rumors saying that, for example, I heard a funny rumor guy saying, and this is just an example, it kind of goes back to the crypto type, I'd recommend you guys view his channel. He talked about this as well, so shout out to him. But the fact that people are hearing information about stuff that makes no sense, it goes through various different parties, and that party tells another person, and that person tells another person, and by the time it gets to the newbies, they have no clue and they can't discern what is fact from make-believe. And a good example of that is, someone came in the Telegram and was saying that Consensus had ran out of money. They believed that Consensus had actually made the EOS IO software, and therefore no further development would be done on EOS. So that's completely false. That makes no sense. Consensus has nothing to do with EOS. As we all know, blackswan is the folks that started this process in developing the software and helping the community launch this project. So I thought that was pretty amusing, and that's just one example. There were other various rumors, some on BP, some on some other topics, and then there was also some frustration, obviously, with community in that I think a lot of them expected the wallet to be deployed already at this time, along with the quote-unquote killer dApp. And so people just sold off. They had no clue what they're buying. In fact, a lot of them bought this technology because they thought they could get a Lambo. And because they saw the market sell off, they decided to sell off. So what I'm looking at right now, I mentioned, information asymmetry. And it's where you have a group of people who basically, a smaller group of people who know the information, and a larger group of people who obviously don't know. And there's an arbitrage that people take advantage of. So those that have the information obviously take advantage of those that don't have the information. And I think that's what you saw in the markets this week. And you might even continue to see it. We may not even be at the lowest levels. You might see Bitcoin go, again, all the way down below, a little bit below 2,000. I wouldn't be surprised personally. But I've already started to make my moves. I am doubling down, both in education and in terms of my portfolio in cryptocurrencies. So I've started to, for the very first time this year, actually start to initiate some positions. I've been a holder here, but at these prices, it's pretty attractive. I didn't think we'd be down at these levels again. So it's nice to have another opportunity to build the portfolio. And I know there's immediate people around me that have the courage, who also have had the courage to do some of that. It's a little bit hard right now because it takes mental discipline to not look at the day-to-day swings or the week-to-week swings and look at the long-term value of what's going on in the markets. Obviously, this is not investment advice. I'm just telling you guys what I'm doing. And it's my effort to be transparent with you so I can give the story, and give you guys the narrative of how I'm progressing through the space. And it's certainly not the first time I've been in this. In fact, the very first time was in 2013, I believe, where we had that huge burst in the crypto space with Bitcoin. And so I've been in that. I've been in this one. It's probably not going to be the last time, guys. And you just kind of have to get used to it. And until the value is more transparent in the market, I think you're going to continue to see these swings, especially as larger institutions potentially intentionally move prices to gain more market share. So the way I'm characterizing this, guys, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about this, but the way I'm characterizing this is it's actually not so much in 2017 we had what was called the ICOs, right? The initial coin offerings. And I think right now what you're seeing is what I'm calling the initial information offering. So obviously a lot of these projects have launched, but what you're seeing right now is you're seeing really a information offering, because those that want and seek the information and have the information are making, I think, the moves, the strategic moves, and those that don't have the information are probably cashing in. So I call it an IIO. So a lot of people might be wondering, even agnostic to EOS, and we'll get to some of that news and some of the interesting concepts that got discussed this week, but you might be wondering, well, what's going to propel this market forward? We haven't really seen it. And in my opinion, a lot of people are saying gaming. I think that's a huge part of it. There's a huge component of that. We've seen a lot of success in EOS on that, especially with the demonstration of the platform being able to handle the amount of transactions and volume. But so gaming is a big part of it, and there's no doubt about that. And we've seen a lot of news this week and last week on some gaming organizations getting involved and committing some efforts to start projects and launch games on EOS. So the digital market for I guess you could say digital assets, in-game assets, is going to be huge. But even outside of that, what a lot of people aren't talking about in the traditional EOS space, I haven't heard anybody talk about this, but what I'm looking at, EOS Phoenix here, is looking at Catalyst. I would call them, I'd more characterize them as black swans or, rhinos or whatever you want to call them. But there's a lot of things right now going on in the traditional financial markets that are eyebrow raising, because they have the potential to speed up, I think, the adoption process and the recognition of value for blockchain. And the ones I'm looking at in particular here, some of these are actually local to my markets, is the financial transparency. And so we already went through, in 2007, a huge, obviously, financial crisis in housing markets. And a lot of people may rush to judgment and say, those issues have been resolved. We're not seeing those issues anymore. But in fact, if you do some research and you look at sources like Zero Hedge and you read reports from some of these financial agencies, what you're going to learn is that a lot of the financial risk has just been transferred. And what's happened is a lot of the traditional banking institutions have partnered with, subprime lenders, so non-bank institutions. And what these non-bank institutions do is they give loans to people for all kinds of stuff. They give loans to people for subprime car loans, for example. Some of them have college loans. Some of them are home equity lines of credit. And so there's an extension from the traditional banks to these non-banking institutions. And these non-banking institutions are lending this money out, sometimes to a huge tune. You're looking at $500 billion to, a couple $1 trillion, in fact, in the markets right now, if you look at it from an international perspective. And you're seeing, with interest rates increasing, credit markets slowing down. There's been a slowdown of those things, and you're seeing the assets that these folks received loans on collapsing in some senses. Now here in Phoenix it's been relatively strong, but in other markets such as San Francisco and Los Angeles, you're seeing prices come down on things. And you're also seeing geopolitical risk right now. You're seeing a lot of interesting things in France. For example, we have the yellow jackets or the yellow vest or whatever they're called, fighting against Macron and, making a case for being against some of the taxes there. Whether you're for or against the yellow jackets, what we're recognizing is there's a lot of financial, I guess there's differences in the distribution of wealth, and these disparities are becoming more apparent where, you're seeing more unrest and uncertainties in these regions. So you have a culmination of things all occurring at the same time. You have the issues between China and United States, and furthering along in terms of the complications in relationships. Just this week, you had the CFO from Hui, the phone maker, get, taken into custody in Canada. And you can imagine what that's going to do for the Chinese and USA relations. So what this spells, guys, is I think, slowing down in trade, potentially. You're seeing more nationalism on a temporary basis. And, where you had in the past maybe money flowing, especially like money from China flowing into the United States on real estate, you're going to maybe see that reverse potentially. And so with the subprime lending and the confidence maybe being reduced, that's going to put a strain on capital markets. What does this all lead to? In a nutshell, I think it'll lead to some type of other financial crisis. We don't know exactly where it's going to manifest itself. It may not manifest itself in the housing market, for example, but the subprime lending, the shadow banking system, we know there's some games being played, and eventually the jig and rig will be up, and then it will spread into other markets. And so I think that'll be actually the catalyst that propels something like blockchain to the forefront, because in my opinion, no financial company, within the next, let's say 10 years from now, will be able to even operate without having a connection into blockchain, because you'll need the ability to have true financial transparency in terms of money flow, and the ability to provide not only the governments but the citizens of a community transparency, right? Because you have right now a lot of market rigging, and in fact a lot of people are saying, this week, well, if there's market rigging, how can you even determine what the price of a blockchain technology is? How can you determine the price of Bitcoin? How can you determine the price of EOS? And what I'd argue is you really can't until you have the transparency in those traditional markets. You don't know how much supply there is in the world's reserve currency, for example. There's no way to actually know. It's never been audited. So in theory, any of those banks can, or any of the Federal Reserve banks, I should say, could print up money, and there's not a whole lot in terms of auditing or accountability that is done and the relationships they have with the large banks. And even if there is, in fact, most of the time, they're being lent the money at near zero interest rate, and then taking that money and giving it to one of their cronies, right? So what's going to happen, guys, when you have something like a truth machine, right? What I mean by a truth machine is you have complete transparency in the financial markets. It's going to price a lot of the assets back to probably where they should be. It's going to fully price in the risk associated with that. And it's going to get rid of the free access to easy money. And that could actually lead to valuing, the information system like a blockchain higher. But it's also going to, I think, mark to market a lot of the other assets that have been in a bubble territory, because there is no way to really price them in a model that is built on phony and fraudulent structure. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about that. In terms of EOS, seeing a lot of interesting news. This week we saw June, shout out to June from EOS Ignite, launching the first global hackathon we did have hackathons in the past, like Block.1 did a hackathon, but that was in Africa. So this is, in my opinion, really the first global hackathon. And I'm going to be a part of that. I'm going to be allocating probably my Fridays to doing my own thing, Friday and Saturday, doing my own project, just on my own time frame. And always looking for people in Phoenix to work through that, mostly on a coding basis, not some of the other roles. I think I'm mostly just focused on understanding that technology more and actually coding it and dissecting the codes, the coding, so we can make an application. The other stuff just comes along with it, as we saw in San Francisco. We were fortunate enough to be in San Francisco. I actually didn't mention that in my previous videos, but we sent a team out there. We had a team of 5 in San Francisco, and we made an amazing pitch to Mike Novogratz, of all people. It was a great opportunity to learn and be a part of that event. And I think, me personally, I learned so much just in doing that, just in going up there and making a pitch to someone like Mike Novogratz, working with the team on the concept we put together, and now taking that back to Phoenix and working to refine it, and come up with models and come up with a concept that can be used today, that maybe doesn't involve as much dependencies on the regulatory system. So that's what I'm up to here locally. I'd love to hear what you guys are a part of. The other thing I want to mention is, what's very interesting about EOS over something like Bitcoin. I still like Bitcoin personally. I think there's a trade-off between security, speed, performance, and network effects. So I think the two have their roles, different roles. But with EOS, what's really interesting is the concept of this resources. And I'm wondering, over time, what type of strain that'll put on the demand for the tokens in a good way. Because what I mean by that is many of the people right now, they don't really vote. They don't use their resources. But over time, as the actual token resources are used, the EOS token is not only used for payments like Bitcoin, but it's also a resource just like land. And as that resource is put to work, as companies continue to build on it, it's going to actually remove, if you think about it, it'll actually remove those tokens from the available supply in a sense. So you start to get higher percentages of staked tokens on the network as you move from maybe 50% to 70% to arguably 80-85%. And then you have another 10% maybe held in wallets, not really on the exchanges. You're going to see the amount of tokens available on an exchange go down substantially. And so what do you think is going to happen to the price, guys? Especially as the education gets out there that it's important for people to hold their private keys. We can't forget about the methods that a lot of these folks will use to create fraud on these markets. They often will use things like rehypothecation, which is what we're seeing in the traditional markets, which I didn't mention, but is a fact, right? If you're buying a stock on the New York Stock Exchange, or you're buying other stocks on other exchanges, how do you know where the stocks are actually stored? How do you know that the amount of stocks they're selling are equal to the amount of stocks outstanding? You don't really know that. And so there is a chance that, there could be fraud in these markets, right? They could continue to sell the same asset over and over, and no one would ever know. And you might be seeing the same thing with, something like a cryptocurrency, right? I think many of the governments and regulators will catch on to this. And, in the short term, there could be some evidence that this move or strategy was done illegally on the way up in terms of the prices. But I think also, you could be seeing this on the way down. And I think eventually this will be put to bed for two reasons. One, I think regulators are going to catch on to this and find ways to identify the bad actors in the network. The other thing you might see is obviously the demand, because of the nature and how EOS as an asset can be used, and it's really a triple threat. You have the investor role, you have the developer role, and you have the user role. And so all three of those are going to blend together, and it'll be very hard, I think, in my opinion. It has the best chance of, I think, mitigating some of those issues by lowering or decreasing the amount of tokens in that are available, right, to manipulate. And especially as people now begin to educate themselves on the value and how they can earn money, right, through voting, for example, through the Rex, earning money. What do you guys think that's going to do to the prices? That's really what excites me. Also, the fact that more people are understanding this now, because a lot of them did not and do not understand this at this time. I continue to see people in Telegram confused about just what this project is. So that's my video right now, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your comments. What are you excited about? What are you building? Are you getting involved in EOS Ignite's hackathon? Please leave your comments below. And another thing I'm curious to hear from you guys on is, there's been this rumor about Dan Larimer's what I would call Facebook 2.0, aka Steam at 2.0. And some of the things I'm trying to do right now is gather comments from the community on what ideas or what features you guys would like to see on something like this, on an application like that. Are you looking at, maybe having a desire to have a marketplace in a Facebook 2.0? Maybe a barter system where you're able to barter your EOS for actual physical goods in your community. Maybe you're lending your bandwidth to a local business and receiving some type of a free or swag for you lending your bandwidth. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do. You can actually have marketplaces for EOS tokens. You could have marketplaces just to lend your bandwidth and essentially use that almost like your own resource inheritance. I guess you could think about it like that. If you had enough tokens in theory, and if the EOS price moves up there, you could have some type of a way that allows you to transact and interact with a business that needs the resources, who then interacts with an owner of a real estate, and then have a three-party smart contract system. I don't know. There's all kinds of stuff, guys. So please, let's keep the juices flowing. Let me know your thoughts. Share them below. Hit the like button. Consider subscribing. And hope you guys are having a beautiful Sunday. As you can see, just watching the sunset here. Beautiful afternoon. And just want to sign off and want to say hello to you guys. So take it easy, and we'll talk to you guys later. Peace.